All right. Well, hi, hello, and welcome to Offensive Security Tips and Trends for 2025 with NVIDIA and PlexTrac. Now, today's exciting webinar is sponsored by PlexTrac and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, a future B2B company, and I'm so happy that I get to be your moderator today because we are checking in on those New Year's resolutions that you made way back when, way back in 2024, which I know feels like a year ago already. When you were back in the 2024 days and you were looking ahead and setting your company's cybersecurity strategy goals and planning for where you were going to go in 2025. And here we are 1 month into the year. And so now's a pretty good time to check in. Are you setting yourself up to meet those goals? Now, I would argue that just by joining in today, that's a good sign you're all on track, especially if one of your resolutions was to set your organization up to be more proactive rather than reactive. And that's what we're going to get into today. Some of those key predictions, that important advice for how you can build your proactive priority list for your security strategies in 2025. With the help of our expert presenters, we are going to talk about key insights. We're going to outline some action steps that are going to improve your pen test reporting time. We're going to talk about building collaboration. We're going to talk about AI, of course. We're going to talk about improving report quality and lots more. This is going to be such an interesting conversation. I cannot wait to dive in. So I'm going to start out with just a few housekeeping points here today to help you get the most out of your time with us, because most importantly, first and foremost, I want to point out the brand new digs, right? Welcome to our new home. How exciting is this? So even if you are a longtime veteran of our webinars, you may not be as familiar with the console. So let's walk through, take a little tour together right now, and then we'll bring our speakers on out here. Now, I want to start out with the chat tab. Now, this is on the far right-hand side of your screen. So this is where you can say hi, you can say hello, we can connect with our fellow attendees. We're going to share all of our thoughts, our ideas, our stories, our favorite emojis, whatever you get excited about. You can send those messages, send those emojis, get to know our wonderful community a little bit better. We're going to try it out now. I see lots coming in the chat. Oh, I love this. Hey, Michael. Hey, Janelle. Hey, Franklin, Tatiana. Ooh, we got a whole awesome crew. This is so exciting. I'm loving the live chat. This is brand new, so I'm very happy that I get to hear from all of you, and we get to be a part of this collaborative learning community as we go through that together. I also want to take a moment to introduce Deanna Albuquerque, who is our wonderful coordinator behind the scenes. So she will be chatting with all of you today as well and helping us run a smooth show. So say hi to Deanna out there. Quick reminder that that chat tab is where you go if you do need to reach out to Diana and myself if you have any technical issues during the session. Now, hopefully this doesn't come up, knock on wood. And the very first thing you're going to try is a browser refresh. I promise a browser refresh is going to clear out pretty much anything that comes up. But if that browser refresh does not work for you, no problem. You're just going to post in the chat window and Deanna and I will be there to help you out. Okay, so while chat is there for all the general thoughts and the ideas, all the connection building, getting to know folks, the Q&A is where you're going to ask your questions. So we started out in that chat tab, and then we're going to bounce 2 tabs over to the Q&A tab. So this is where you're going to get your live questions in for our incredible speakers here today. And we have a very fun and interactive conversation planned for all of you. We are throwing the slides out, we're throwing the script out, and we're just chatting. And so an important part of that is hearing from you. So make sure you're using that chat window and make sure you're using the Q&A to get all of those questions in. As always, if we don't get to your question during a live Q&A session, we will follow up with you after we wrap. The last stop on our tour today is that Docs tab. We have some very exciting content to go along with the webinar today, so make sure you have spent some time in that Docs tab. There are some really cool takeaways and follow-ups to everything that we're going to be chatting about. So make sure you've opened that Docs tab and start exploring. Well, as you can see, we have 2 incredible speakers here with us today. I'm going to bring them out in just a moment. But I want to introduce you to our wonderful presenters that we will be learning from and exploring these topics with today. And that is, of course, Dan DeCloss, founder and CTO at PlexTrac, and Tyler Robinson, offensive capability lead at NVIDIA. Dan and Tyler, I'm going to bring you out on stage with me here. Welcome. Oh, there we go. Hey, team, welcome to the stage.
How are you? This is fancy. I like it.
Right? Yeah. New house. Welcome. This is your little tour. We're very excited about it. Dan and Tyler. Okay, we have a lot to cover. We have a lot that we want to get into today. And what I'm pretty pumped about, I just kind of breaking the fourth wall here with our audience, is that we don't entirely know where this conversation is going to go either, because we have some things we want to talk about. We have some ideas of where we want to go, but we're going to kind of base it off of where the passion takes us today, where the ideas take us, and where the audience takes us with their questions. So that's absolutely thrilling to me, and I cannot wait to dive in. What I'd love to start with, though, is just a quick kind of, we've done names and titles, but stepping beyond that, if I could ask each one of you to give me a little idea of you and what you're passionate about and what you would most like to kind of get into today, as we explore with our audience. And Dan, maybe I'll ask you to kick us off, and then Tyler.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. So yeah, well, one, thanks everybody for joining us. We know your time is valuable. So we hope that this will be a good use of your time, and excited about the conversation. And thanks, Tyler, for joining us. And then Jess, thanks for putting this all together. But yeah, so like my background has been in offensive security, penetration testing. And what I'm passionate about is actually, taking the results of these, critical risk items that are getting reported out of all of these tests, over the years. I've been involved in a lot of those types of assessments, and then kind of felt like you get those findings and those risks identified, and then they're put into the hands of the people that you think should be fixing them, and then they kind of like get lost in the ether, or they don't get really prioritized the right way. And so I'm really passionate about actually making a difference, in terms of security, and making sure that the issues are getting identified correctly and prioritized correctly, and actually reducing the risk. So that's what I'm really passionate about. And I think that offensive security has always been the best way to identify, and be proactive. And that's obviously why I started PlexTrac and things like that. So I'm really excited to dive into those topics today, and kind of help share with the audience, as well as around how we're seeing the trends change this year, and all the new technology that has come out over the last couple of years, and what impact that has both on the offensive security space, but then how do we actually make those into meaningful action results and things like that. So really excited about it. Tyler, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you. No, Tyler Robinson, thank you guys for coming to this. This is exciting. As you all know, Dan and I go way back, so it's always fun when I see a message from Dan, hey, you want to do something? Oh yeah, definitely gonna hop in on that. PlexTrac's been a close friend and a company I've seen develop over the years. It's just phenomenal. So besides being good friends, like, they do provide some interesting things that I, as a offensive security practitioner for I'm coming up on 30 years, like we'll call it 27 now. Wasn't really a job way back then, but we'll call it something different. The reporting side of that has always been a passion of mine, because I hated reporting so much, and then I hated findings getting out there and not being dealt with, or having too much on my plate to follow up, to remediate, to help the blue team properly. That was one of the real big gaps in the very early days, was quality reporting and just interaction, and really assisting the blue team, and doing that, could be on multiple communication channels, different platforms. They could go through, multiple different ticketing systems, all those things that are just things that the offensive people know keeping up is very hard. We weren't keeping up with the blue team and helping them out after we were done with tests. So like what PlexTrac brought really alleviated many problems for me. So I am a true believer and evangelist for many, many years. So I'm excited to be here, talk about some interesting things in the offensive space. It's definitely changing a ton with AI and a lot of the stuff coming out. And a lot of the stuff is still the same. We're just repeating history over and over again. So it'll be an interesting conversation with some different perspectives, I'm sure, than many people.
Ooh, Tyler. Okay, that's exactly where I wanted to start this conversation. First and foremost, though, I have to say, Dan, you just heard Tyler say that whatever you ask, he's in. So I feel like that's a dangerous precedent to set.
Yeah, that's a bold statement.
It's those text messages that you get like, hey, what are you doing next Friday? And Tyler's like, I'm in before.
Yeah.
Mexican jails. All right.
Let's do it. Yeah, what do you got? Let's do it, man. Everyone needs that one friend. That's important. Okay. But Tyler, that's exactly where I wanted to start with this today, because I think security changes all the time, right? And everything's evolving rapidly. And right now, industries are being totally blown up by AI. And what I'd love to get an idea from you guys is, Is it as revolutionary as we think it is, as as the hype makes it seem? Is everything blown up and starting from scratch and changing? Or maybe some things, but others, Tyler, you just said maybe some things are staying the same. Where do you guys sit on that?
I mean, if you had asked me that, say 3 to 2 years ago, I don't know, somewhere in between there, I would have said that AI at its stage, it was probably like having a high school intern that really didn't understand how to use a debit card or get coffee, and in which you had to do so much work to actually help them with work, that it was not worth any of your time. Now that's changed quite a bit. As soon as we've seen ChatGPT come out, and we actually seen some improvement around model providing them, access to the internet, ongoing language model updates, and agentic AI agents, like all of the things kind of changed. There was a pretty big shift there once that happened, because again, we were working with something that could go get information, but you didn't know if that information was out of date. It was off, line in like 2021. Like all of those things were like, okay, that's kind of cool. I see where this could go, but like this is not really useful. In fact, it was kind of like academia, taking some old college classes from an old professor that hasn't been in the game in 20 years. It was really not all that fun. Now we are really at a point where people are building some very interesting products. We have AI coming in very strategic ways with the research and the deep learning, and providing information specific to organizations where they're training on internal data and leveraging the different language models to then articulate and gain access to do things more efficiently. And at the end of the day, that's what hopefully we were looking to get to, rather than, world domination of the AI and Terminator starting out. Like, I hope we were working towards efficiency so we all have more time to do the things that are important. But it is kind of that in-between place where things are getting really good, but it is a steep learning curve, and there are a lot of mistakes still being made, and a lot of caveat to doing this right and doing this well.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Tyler in terms of like ChatGPT coming onto the scene really did become a game changer for both how offensive security practitioners need to look at the world, as well as how attackers and threat actors are looking at the world as well, right? So the use of AI for it's speeding up attacks and speeding up exploit development and speeding up every facet of the attack lifecycle is something to really be noted. And we've talked about this before with with other folks, but there's a lot of work going on in the AI space for being able to conduct exploits in a more autonomous fashion. And the way that I see it, and Tyler, I'd love to kind of hear your opinion here too, is like it's very similar to as we continue to enhance automation capabilities, it allows the attackers and offensive security professionals to identify the lower hanging fruit more quickly, and then be able to dive in deeper on the more intricate exploits, right? So when Burp Suite came on the scene, it sped up how we could attack websites. And so it took away the time to find that lower hanging fruit, and really allowed us to dive into the deeper and more complicated exploits. I don't think anything is much different, in terms of AI, except that it's advancing a lot, of the things that do consume more of offensive security team members' time. So I think that's really, really important. I think that's a trend that we'll continue to see. And then how do defenders that may not have as much experience with offensive security, how can they leverage the AI to be able to, these AI tools and this automation, to be able to identify deeper, bigger gaps in their organization without having the skill set that someone like Tyler or me would have had, right? So I really see it as a game changer and continuing to be that trend. And I think we'll see a lot more advancement. Tyler, I'd love your thoughts there. But.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, and I think there are a lot of different back and forths on that particular use case, right? Like you do have a lot of play being made with the offensive space. Like you can definitely speed up your operations. You can have a knowledge base where you can ask questions that would otherwise have to be base knowledge. So we've lowered the barrier of entry for some of the script kiddies or some of the lower tier threat actor groups in order to provide them with easy answers, easy ways to write out exploit code, easy ways to build a script on the fly. Like that takes, you could write a good script if you're good at prompting and you have a nice LLM that's not guardrailed. You can write out some malicious code in 30 seconds. Back in the day, you had to actually do that, look for an example, modify it, double check it. Like it lowered the bar for the attackers, but it did also lower the bar for the defenders, where we are adding a lot of these AI agents and the ability to ask specific questions of AI to build out defensive capabilities, to build out KQL queries for your hunting. We're integrating, a lot of detection capabilities for heuristics around AI and looking for pattern matching and doing that across very large amounts of data. So those things are also, I think, encouraging to see, where we're able to identify and even do some pre-identification of vulnerabilities within inside of tools as part of the pipeline through models that are evaluating those things. Those are promising areas that bring the bar, I think, higher for the attacker in certain areas, but it's also still lower. And right now we have tools at people's fingertips that are allowing them to do things that are they could be very dangerous and they don't fully understand. And then you get to the higher end top tier of that, and you see things like polymorphic AI agents, things that like Jeff Sims working on with his like AI voodoo, or his espionage, where it looks at different companies and provides you ways in which phishing or social engineering might work. Like those are truly advancements that show proof of concept. Like obviously nation states are doing these exact things. If we're doing them and we're thinking of them, then absolutely this is in the pipeline. So now it's changed the threat landscape of nation state attacks and the vulnerabilities and things you have to look at and think about from your threat risk profile, and then begin to build a plan, because it is going to come down the pipe and it's actually probably already here. So now what is your plan and roadmap to begin to address the new threat landscape and where this models are going?
I think, excuse me, I think that's a great point. And you triggered something that also excites me and also makes me want to make sure we, emphasize the importance of being proactive and using AI as a defender for the benefit of your organization, or whoever you're working for, in that it can help you identify some of that low-hanging fruit. But I think also what's important is that attackers are using this, and then they're also not necessarily any breach and exploit, deeper exploitation, of organizations right now. Most of them you see are not using zero-day exploits, right? They're not exploiting vulnerabilities that haven't been patched or things like that. They're using what we would just typically say are tried and true techniques that organizations just still tend to miss. And I think that's an area that AI could really, really help in, because AI is great at distilling the known knowns and helping you identify through large data sets where you might have gaps. And I think that is something we will definitely see a trend in as we continue to move forward, with the AI research, both on the offensive side, but using that from a defensive perspective. So I think it's really important to highlight that, most breaches, are the initial vectors or a combination of the vectors that provide for deep exploitation are not super sophisticated exploitation techniques, right? They're the ones where, hey, you left MFA off on a specific server, or your password policy for a subset of groups within AD just didn't happen to be configured correctly, and they were susceptible to spraying, things like that. And I think those are the things that AI could do a really good job of. It's as we know in our space, defending against the unknowns is going to be always always going to be hard, right? We just don't know what we're talking about. But if you get an upper leg on the things that we do know about, using MITRE ATT&CK as kind of a baseline for TTPs and how to be testing for it, you really can at least start to be able to communicate effectively around your gaps with those known techniques, which tends to be how you're initially going to get compromised.
I mean, it is oh, you're good.
No, Tyler, you go ahead. I'm gonna let you dig in.
There's some interesting things there that triggered some thought around the defense and really getting the basics right. Like one of the things that we've been saying this, Dan, for at least doing this together, at least for 15 years, saying the same thing of, the basics are where the bread and butter's at of true protection, getting the core fundamental foundation of good security, following best practices, getting the STIGs, running through all those. But the reality of doing that, like, it's easy for everyone to say that. And then, red teams, pen testers, all of them, like, just do this, just turn off local admin. Okay, but how? Like there is a lot to some of these basic recommendations, the fundamentals, doing it right. And there is a business at the end of each of the things that we don't always consider from an IT or security standpoint. Like business goes on, there's business risk decisions, but there's also business decisions. Like there's not just one silo to business, and really wrapping your mind around security is not the only thing that is considered and thought about, which is why we are in the state we're in for security. Now, I'm not saying that security is not important, and it is the forefront of a lot of executives' minds now, where we are trying to, we've now seen the risk, it's been demonstrated, the impacts there, but the ability for defenders and executives to get onto the same page and speak the same language and understand that the risks have to be addressed, but also understand that IT's hard. Like the defenders, they really do need a pat on the back. They need to be heroized more than the red team, more than the attackers. Like let's give them some hero names and some techniques and tools to do a better job, because they have a hard job to do. And I think AI hopefully begins to do and focus on that a little bit more, because we have seen a lot of experimentation around just AI in general being used either maliciously or to short circuit stuff, or to make things easier, yes, but also not making the world generally a better place. Like now we've got interview people that maybe shouldn't be candidates who just use ChatGPT to get a job, to then not be great. Like we're going to see, I think, improvements down those routes that hopefully lend a hand to IT in general and begin to provide them the resources, the support, the budget, the mindset, all of those things that they've been lacking over the last 2 decades, and really do a better job. And that being said, like even around budgets, like there was a question in the chat around being able to emulate some of the APTs or emulate some of the red team and pen test things. Like let's start to leverage those so we can recoup budget to give back to blue teams. I mean, it is not going to be very effective right this second. There's a lot of projects. There's a lot of pretty interesting tools that I've seen work to emulate some pen tests, to emulate some APT tactics. But we'll be real, like APT, good red teams, they are going to be the creative type. They're going to be looking for breaking process and procedure, looking at different flows, and really thinking very, very, very much outside of the box in ways that AI is probably going to have a little bit harder time doing. Like we are very creative elements, which is why we're never going to be replaced. That being said, we can take some of the small, easy tasks, the minutia tasks, the tasks in which you maybe shouldn't have a red team, because we need to address these tasks first before we bring in and spend money on a red team. I believe AI is there and can begin to do some of that. It will never replace pen tests. It will never replace red teams. But that's going to be the simulations and the emulations part. I believe you can start to build good playbooks and build out good scripts and work with some companies that are doing some cool things with tools around that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know that, like, I'm not aware of like a single tool that could do that, today using modern AI. But what I have seen people doing is, there's different projects, right, for both the threat hunting side and the threat intelligence side, and merging that with the actual exploitation capabilities. So being able to have models. So like, at RSA last year, Adam Mashinsky in his cohort or his peer did a pretty good presentation on just like creating a model that took threat intelligence reports and overlaid it where you basically worked on the prompts of like, hey, in my tech stack, I have these capabilities within my tech stack. We're a Mac shop or we're a Windows shop, for example. Basic things like that, where they could actually prompt the agent and say like, what TTPs should I actually be, worried about? And then from there, kind of marrying that with, hey, now create scripts and provide exploits that focus on these things, so you can make the attack much more realistic to the environment before you even submitted any kind of exploit. And I think kind of in answering that question around like how do you emulate this stuff, I think we're going to continue to see a lot of that progress. And there are other like pen test automation tooling out there that claim to use AI, and I can't speak to how in depth it is versus versus what we're seeing in the open source world. But I think Jason Haddix also has some really good work out there with like his red purple teaming type stuff. So I think that's where we're going to see a lot more focus this year is how do we start to marry this where it's like, hey, the known TTPs we can speak about intelligently. And you brought up another prompt that continuing to have a common nomenclature about how we speak about breaches, I think is going to continue to improve, which makes me happy, right? Because like I think, as far back as I can remember being a pen tester, you always wanted to talk to people about like, well, what actually will get you breached, right? What are the things, and I think that is continuing to drive more focus than it has in the past, because it's like we said, it's the common known techniques that are starting that once you can address those, then the zero-day exploits, the really complicated exploits, those are then what you have to like start to defend against. But man, if you're in that state, you're in a really good spot. So I think we'll definitely see some trends from the merging of like threat intelligence correlation to using AI to help identify how to exploit this environment based on that. And I think it's also important, like attackers are also doing this research as well, and they're not sharing it. So.
Wouldn't that be nice?
The threat intelligence side is super, super exciting, right? Because that is where AI is really good at, like summarizing and parsing and digesting large amounts of data and intel. So that has a lot of potential, brings a lot of knowledge. But along those same lines, right? Like now we have AI agents doing pentest, AI doing red team. We got all this threat intelligence. We can summarize all that. You still have to have reports. You still have to disseminate information. You still have to be able to bring ticketing down and be able to collaborate with the teams. Like, I love AI is speeding some of this up and it's providing more knowledge, more data. But with more data comes more problems, as you know, Dan. There is some serious issues with not being able to collaborate, not being able to do much for the different pieces of telemetry you're gathering from all this. And we also have a skill set gap, right? Like AI is bringing in a lot of new vulnerabilities or risk to organization and businesses. Really understanding like, where is your data going? What models are you training against? You have to have an understanding of models. You have to have an understanding of what your RAG pipeline is. You have to have an understanding of where the data lake or the data being trained on is actually living, and is it going back into an LLM that you control on your hardware, not your hardware, shared hardware. Like all of these things then become business risks. At some point, we're going to start to see some of these attacks and business risks begin to come out. Like, yeah, we have a lot of jailbreaks. We got a lot of, guardrail bypasses on AI, which has its own set. People can have their own AI, so it's not as huge of a risk. But when you start to talk about data living outside and AI having access to that, like as we begin to do more and more AI, like if companies don't have that skill set to, one, understand what the risks are, to understand what they're providing through AI and where their data lives and their separation and permissions and proper ACLs. And then two, what are the risks to the models and the things that you're building into your products, right? Like we've got whole new attack lines on Onyx files, on Pickle files, on things that can execute things on an AI model. Like those things will, if that's running in your product or running on your infrastructure as a SaaS provider providing something to your clients, like now you've got an entirely new set of tech stack that you've got to understand, protect, and we've provided a layer of complexity and abstraction that now makes it even more difficult for IT to evaluate and know those risks. So it's definitely a landscape that is going to take some people some time to get up to speed on, but we need to be up to speed, every one of us.
Yeah, it increases the attack surface for sure, but so then you have to continue to weigh that from your risk management stuff. Jess, I know you were gonna chime in with a question. I think we just started riffing, so I didn't know.
No, you guys are. I'm on the edge of my standing mat. This is It's absolutely thrilling. No, and I do want to make sure that we get into some questions as well as we're kind of going through here. You guys have been doing a good job of answering them actually as they're kind of coming up. But maybe before I switch into audience questions, what I was kind of wondering about, and Tyler, you've been sort of brushing along this, and especially with our skill deficit, and I think this comes up a lot. Do you think that the entire nature of what it means to be an OffSec pro or to have a security team, does the team need to restructure? Is it training? Is it like, what is the trend that we're going to see for the teams themselves moving forward into 2025?
I think a lot of that is going to be hyper dependent on the vertical maturity and team structure in its current form. You're going to have people that are naturally inclined to want to go learn AI. They're going to probably do it themselves. You should 100% support that as much as you can and begin to build that out. But the structure will have to change because there are going to be very specific threat models and information in many of the larger organizations that are going to have to be dedicated to keeping up to speed on all of just the AI stuff, the AI risk, the models. And we'll be real, even when we abstract this, like most of us don't even understand the surface of how AI truly works and the level of math it takes to do some of this correctly at the layers that, you know, many of the people I work with do. I don't even pretend to dive in on some of the stuff like Joe Lucas and Rich Herring put out. So there's a lot of math, there's a lot of statistics. So you're going to naturally have to have some expertise in there, even as they're building, and you're going to have to understand where that team structure is going to make sense in an org based on your maturity. If you guys are not deploying any AI other than like a business co-pilot, then great. Now you need a Microsoft pro, and you need someone that's up to speed on AI in Microsoft and how Copilot's functioning, and then what data you're providing it with the ways to secure it. Now, if you've got multiple teams and you're providing AI in a product, and you're going to have some data scientists, you're going to have a little bit of offensive-minded and defensive-minded people for that, with infrastructure that then understands some of the nuance of how AI is going to have to integrate into your product and where that solution fits to make security work. Like all of these things, there's going to be definitely some restructure, and I think it's going to make a lot of sense to naturally let some of that play out so that you see who's actually interested and capable, as well as get everybody on a baseline and start to begin to provide resources so that they at least have a general understanding, because it is going to apply to basically everybody in IT at some point.
Yeah, I think like in terms of like it's the age-old question of like how do you continue to keep your skills up? I mean, I think one thing that's unique, not only being in tech but also being in the offensive security side of tech, is that you always kind of have to know at a base level a lot of different technologies, right? Or be really good at researching it on the fly, right? And so AI doesn't change that. I think AI can be viewed two ways, right? And should be, is like, one, it's another tool that you're going to be able to leverage to improve the quality of your tests and the capabilities of your testing. But also like, hey, because it's expanded the attack surface, you now need to learn, what are the techniques that we should be testing against the AI themselves, right? So that I don't know that changes much. This, as we see trends, just like anything else, as technology continues to evolve, offensive security professionals have to kind of keep up on it. What's nice is like we have a great community that continues to help facilitate that learning quicker. You've got the people on the forefront that are doing the research, they're publishing it, they're helping out the community, and then there's those of us that may lag behind a little bit and are riding the coattails of some of that research to be able to kind of continue to expand on it as well. So I think it's always going to be a combination. I don't know that. I think that AI can help improve some of the training for the basics for an offensive security professional, in terms of just like, hey, what do I need to know about XYZ, and being able to ask questions. But the trend that we continue to see in OffSec is like, hey, there's always new stuff coming out, and so I think everybody does need to continue to find resources on their own of where they're learning how to stay on top of these things. And I don't think there's a magic bullet for how we continue to train our industry.
Wouldn't it be nice?
I agree with that. I think Oh yeah, it would be nice. I think one of the things that we will see that NVIDIA is actually already doing, and you'll see this more and more. I think some of the abstraction is going to increase a little bit, and there's going to be some additional security parameters. There's going to be some additional things to test, but also some of the complexity removed with our like microservices like NIMs. Those are going to provide pre-trained, highly optimized and tuned microservices for industry specific things, or like things like BioNemo, which is for biopharmaceuticals, different environments that are already pre-configured where you can build some of that in your tool. So some of the security is going to be evaluated, handled, taken care of, and built. But you also, at that point, we go back to the age old of trust but verify. So now you've got something that's done a lot of the hard work, but you still probably want to trust and verify some of that, and make sure that that's going to enable your company to leverage something like that and take some complexity out and still be secure. So I think we're going to see a lot more of those kind of services start to narrow that gap and begin to fix a little bit of the complexity layers, but it's definitely not going to be the full complexity layers.
Yeah.
Can I ask you guys, I'd like to talk a little bit about the evolution of pen testing, because that has come up a few times in the questions. And so I'm going to read this question here, and then you guys can take it into wherever you want to go with pen testing. I'm sure there's a lot to say. Have you had any success using AI to analyze pen test results for an organization in aggregation, analyzing findings across multiple assessments, including retesting, to provide better management and business insights into the overall risk picture? This is a very well-written question. But also the maturity of remediation processes. Is this something that PlexTrac may add as a feature?
I promise that was not a planted question, because like that's like that is really good.
Nice.
It is something we're very passionate about. So the short answer is yes, we're actually working on that exact thing. But because what we're seeing is that being able to correlate that data across, being able to ask questions of your data is something that we're actually going to be releasing here very soon as we help progress the product in that way, and not trying to plug the product, but it's very too much. But like I'm always going to try and plug the product, but in terms of
as any good CEO does,
right? Yeah. In terms of the goal. In terms of the goal, absolutely, right? So, and it was kind of where I was wanted to kind of head a little bit in terms of when we talk about being proactive, that really means ruthless prioritization of what are the most important things I should be working, right? And so when you have data across multiple types of assessments, both from vulnerability scanning, from threat hunting, from penetration testing, any kind of risk assessments, you want to be able to aggregate that data together and provide some kind of context. It's like, what are the most important things we're going to be working on? We have a module in PlexTrac today called Priorities, which allows you to apply your own custom risk scoring to the findings, right? And so it's based on the business context that you can support. And so it really allows you to have the focus on, hey, based on the criteria that we've set forth, whether we want to focus on assets that are in the DMZ or publicly facing assets or critical assets in this type of a lab environment that houses a lot of our IP, you can set that criteria. And I think that's important, regardless of whether you're using PlexTrac or not, is that's where the future is heading. AI is really good at distilling data, right, and being able to answer questions of the data. And so that's definitely something that we're working on, that it can really help facilitate the entire risk management lifecycle of we're really good at getting data in, right? We're typically pretty good, even on the pen testing side, at finding some really cool stuff. Then how do I aggregate that together and really identify what are the most important things we should be working on? And that's where AI can help. Like, hey, based on the criteria, these are the things that we think are the highest priority. And then you actually got to do the work, though. Then you actually have to assign that out to somebody, track the progress, just like any other kind of project or tasking. But you do start to be able to have a better picture of, hey, are we actually working on the right things, and are we making progress on reducing our risk? And AI will play a great part in that. So short answer is yes, we're actually working on that right now. But it's super important whether it's us or somebody else doing it, right? So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of promise there on that side. I think you guys are definitely leading the way, because you know what a lot of the risks are. You know how to evaluate a pen test report or a scan or a red team, and all of those get put into something that is then allowing you to build a risk profile and a risk picture across multiple types of assessments or teams. That's the real difficult part. And so I haven't seen many other products do that. And as you guys, expand, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more companies trying to do that, but it takes a lot of base knowledge to begin to understand what the customer needs are, that then make that something that is actionable. It's one thing to have it. It's one thing to summarize it. It's one thing to put it into even a business report that may or may not get to someone that cares and can read it. But having something that is actionable with a dashboard, metrics, the ability to pipe it to multiple systems, your Jira tickets, your different metrics capabilities, those all play into the picture of reducing risk from the business standpoint. I think that's a key play. And I think there was another question just around some of that similar stuff around AI and the ability to do some of the real-time analysis of risk in organizations. And I think it's going to be a little while till you see some of that. There's already stuff in defensive tools. There's stuff that play and look at logs and look at firewall traffic, and they're evaluating that. The only product I know of out there that does real-time analysis and does it very, very well is Reversing Labs, and they're doing some amazing stuff with the Reversing Labs Detect right off your pipeline, data lake, inbound traffic flows, as well as the Analyze, where it's looking at the stuff later. But those guys are doing some interesting stuff that I'm hoping with the NVIDIA GPUs, they begin to then even leverage that further, where maybe we are doing entire flow analysis off of a wire. Like that would be awesome at some point to have a complete picture across the whole org of anything and everything that's touching your computers and knowing that it is not malicious. Not quite there. They've done that before when it wasn't quite such a volume, and they do that now on files, but man, it's a big, tall order that hopefully we can start to see GPUs and AI lend a hand.
I think Ned's asking a question that's aligned there, Tyler. You're talking about visibility and being able to kind of see, have that insight. One of the problems that I think can happen with AI is we get really excited about it. It's bright and shiny, and there's lots of opportunities, and so then people just start adding AI into things. And so what Ned is bringing up is that there's a possibility that an organization would add AI into a bunch of places and not actually have insight into how it's working in their organization. That raises compliance issues, privacy issues, and just general, the potential for risk is there. So what advice would you give to an organization that is looking to expand their connection, their integration with AI, and doing it in a way that has insight, has visibility, and is best for the organization?
I would say a lot of focus and planning should be done with the offensive space, just because they know a lot of the risks and players that are doing good and bad things from that space. I would also be looking at new emerging companies that have a good reputation. They don't necessarily have to be big. They don't have to be the best out there, but they probably should have a good reputation. But looking at what you're trying to solve first and making sure you're not adding complexity to your organization, adding risk to your environment, simply by trying to leverage AI in a way that may or may not bring value or be more effective. I think identifying the problem you're trying to solve and where you're trying to use AI should be, even if you're deploying it in a product for your customers, should be the first question everyone is asking as they're moving to AI adoption is, what problem am I trying to solve? And are we truly solving this problem better than doing it the traditional way, doing it in a more creative way? It doesn't have to be, AI does not have to be the end all be all solution to go to the next level. I know for marketers and for buzzwords and for VCs, like they would love for you to just say that you're just moving to AI and AI solves all the problems, but that's not always the correct answer. And it really needs to become the norm to understand that doesn't always have to be the thing that you are doing in a company to be creative, to do good market saturation. Those are great things. If it provides value, let's do it. If it doesn't, let's answer the question, what are we trying to do? And I think that strategy can be adopted. There's some great things that are happening. If you're going to look to start adopting, start with the things that you already pay for, like Copilot with inside of Microsoft. If you're already spending money on E5 licenses throughout your organization, then look at the problem you're trying to solve. You want your team to have faster ability to ask questions of your data. Okay, perfect. There's a problem. Copilot can solve that. Let's make sure that we evaluate the risk by talking to our security teams. What is the risk of enabling Copilot within inside of our organization? What things do we need to set up prior to enabling Copilot in our organization to make it a secure deployment? And that's like doing things like ACLs, getting your document permissions and sensitivity levels created and evaluated. Then you turn Copilot on, and now magically, like, some stuff happens in it and it works well, and you've got good security built in from a company that knows how to deploy an AI product, and they're doing heavy testing and are pretty good at it.
Yeah, I think, it's kind of funny because, like, those of us that lived through the whole cloud transformation, I see a lot of similarities here, with AI, whereas, like, there's people like, you cannot use it, it's too risky, there's so much attack surface there, and I think it's, versus, oh, hey, this is the future, like, let's jump on board. And I think it's very similar in terms of, like, AI is going to continue to be pervasive. It'll weave its way into everything that we're using, right? And in some respects already has. I mean, it's not just ChatGPT. I mean, just not just large language models that we're talking about when we talk about AI. It's the topic du jour because it is so powerful. But AI has been around for a long time in other capacities. But I think, like, what's important is that it's another technology just like anything else. And Tyler hit the head. I always try to start with, like, before we go evaluate, like, hey, we need a tool for this, or we need to automate this, what problem are we actually trying to solve first, right? And is this the right tool for that job? And then from there, you start to evaluate it. Governance is going to continue to be a factor around AI. I mean, it's the Wild West. We all know that, but so was cloud, right? Like, I mean, like, I think you kind of had to start similar. Yeah, I think you have to start similar now as you kind of did in the cloud days of, like, hey, we're just going to have a company policy that, like, these are the areas you can use AI and these are the areas that you cannot, right? How you actually enforce that is going to be an evolutionary thing, but I think starting from, like, hey, what are the aspects that we're willing to take the risk on versus not? Same as, like, with cloud. Like, hey, we're willing to put, like, public facing materials into the cloud, but anything IP wise, we're not going to do that, right? And then over time, you kind of started to learn, like, the cloud vendors are actually going to do a better job of securing the data because they have to, right? Like, that's their job. Their whole business would be at risk. So I think similar capabilities or similar approach within AI as well. So it's still going to take. I think it's still going to take some time as it just continues to change so frequently. But I think that's the right way to approach when you're evaluating AI and bringing it in. So,
and I think that is a conversation that most of the IT needs to, one, get up to speed themselves, like understand what AI is. And how do we make AI safe, accessible, and providing value to the organization? So you can then take that information. Once you really understand it, you understand what the risks is. A lot of the scary stuff comes out of it. It's not quite as magic and cool and smoky mirrors Terminator, sentience that you think it is. It is very much a lot of statistics. So lots of statistics and lots of words. Okay, so providing a good picture that you can articulate to the executives with inside of their language and provide them the knowledge that they need to then make business decisions and come to you for business risk decisions as they are being asked about what they're doing with AI, what governance they're going to follow, and what they're going to put into product, what they're going to leverage or use inside the enterprise. So ensuring that you're up to speed in order to have articulatable conversation with a clear understanding, not just the FUD from the internet, not just from a couple articles, understanding what the technology is, taking that and bringing that to the business in an appropriate manner, because they are relying on us to do that and to do that well. If we do not do that, and the places you'll see failing at AI are the places that do not have a clear picture of what the technology truly is and what the risks truly are, those are the places that you're going to see in the future fail at AI. Just like the cloud, we've seen the people that were anti-cloud. We've seen the people that adopted the cloud too quickly. We've seen the people that just thought the cloud was a magic bullet and didn't articulate anything to executives, but moved everything. So really doing your due diligence, having a good understanding of what AI is and the technologies behind it, and then bringing that to the business so the business has the capability to make good decisions.
Which there's a gentleman in the chat making I think a very tongue-in-cheek suggestion to everyone out there that they just tell all their bosses that AI found this bug, and then they get to relaunch all the issues that they've been hiding. And I think John's making a joke, but it's, I think you're right, Tyler, to your point, that it becomes this sort of, if the AI label is on it, then everybody's in, and it's important to improve that lexicon and that understanding, that literacy around AI before you're making any decisions around that. And Dan, and I'm watching the clock here. We're getting into our final 10 minutes, which is wild. This has gone by so fast. I was like, oh, we got loads of time, and now here we are. Dan, I'm wondering, because speed comes up a lot, and we've talked about real time and the importance of speed, and obviously on threat detection, that's imperative these days. Is there a potential risk with speed that it would impact quality of our work? How do we find that balance between moving quickly and moving effectively?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't know. Like, I think in the OffSec world, there's not a lot of, the faster you go, like it is a proactive mindset, right? So I think you'd want to be a little more concerned if there was something on the reactive side that you're missing. If you're using AI from like threat detection and alerting, you'd want to make sure that that's been tried and true tested, like that something's not slipping through, or that you're doing a lot of evaluation there. Same could be true on the OffSec side, and I'll welcome Tyler's thoughts here. But I think at a minimum, like being able to know that you're testing faster through more techniques, more procedures. I think one of the big things that I'm excited about that we've seen continue to trend in the right direction is speaking about it more in the terms of the TTPs, right? And not just like the shiny exploits that are kind of unique, or the CVEs, but in addition to that, actually being able to speak to like, hey, here's how strong we are in detecting and preventing against lateral movement versus privilege escalation. And these are the techniques that we're really strong at, and these are the gaps that we have. I think that is important. And so the faster you can test against those types of things, to me, it's the better. I think there's always going to be a risk of like you miss something, right? But at a minimum, if you're identifying more and can distill that down into ways to prioritize and remediate it, that's going to be a win regardless. So,
you mean quantitative instead of qualitative now is a good thing? I mean, we've always said some of that, and some of it's been hard to do quantification on pen testing, and I believe being able to distill that down to one improvement, you're quantitatively improving and providing coverage on the things that matter. I think those are really in particularly good things to do. And from an offensive standpoint, we've always been kind of YOLO'd, right? Like blue team, you got to worry about infrastructure, uptime, SLAs, all the things that are hard to do. And the red team's just like, YOLO, let's just test this and use this and we're good to go at very little impact. We've gotten more responsible, at least the mature people and the good teams have been very careful about building out plans, understanding executions and POCs, and really adopting that. And I think the AI, for the people doing it and using it well, have a very, very deep understanding of what the AI is doing, what it is providing for coverage and testing. And then it is then able to quantify all of the things that took a lot more time. So we're effectively providing a better business case and ROI back to the business of our time and coverage. Coverage has always been a big, hard thing for red teams, which is why you usually only left them for mature companies. So obviously pen test was a little bit different, but those are things that I think AI is going to shorten the gap just a little bit.
We are in our final minutes here, and so I'm going to throw a lightning round question at each one of you. And what I would like to do here is I'm going to bring us back to our title. We're talking about trends and we're talking about tips. So I'm going to ask you each for one trend that you are excited about or that you will be watching, whether you're happy excited or nervous excited in 2025. What is one trend that you think should be on everybody's radar, and what is one tip? And Tyler, I'm going to ask you to kick us off, and Dan, you're going to be our grand finale.
All right.
Let's see. One trend I'm excited about. I really think agentic agents, which is essentially being able to leverage very strategic. We'll say the agentic agents gets a little confusion. I believe agentic agents with AI workflow and being able to build very complex pipelines of on very specific data that live in different areas and have them do tasks that are otherwise hard to achieve or take a very long development cycle. I believe those are going to be very, very prevalent this year. Agentic agents provide a ton of insight. They provide access to different data. They can feed much more concrete results back to a different LLM and do multiple rounds of that on different data sets to then get to the most accurate, the most fluid, and the best answer for the thing that you're trying to prompt on. And when you start to build out really complex AI workflows that then do things with that data and those agents, that's when it starts to get really exciting. You get to do way more things on different types of data that is very fun. So I think that trend is going to be the big one for 2025. I'm excited to see that. For tips, I would just say spend a little bit of time to follow a couple people, get in the weeds and look at the core foundation of what AI is and how it's truly working. Like begin to get an understanding of the bits and pieces and ways that come up so that you can understand some of the current events, some of the models coming out, why it matters, whether DeepSeek did whatever they did with their model, and the guardrails that are in there and how they did those things and what impact that has on you, what impact that has on the ability to have a model trained at a lower cost, if that's actually true, if any of those things are just hype news lines, all the things that you don't know unless you start to dig in, and then you can start to build some reasonable reasoning around that. So I would say spend the time to understand the fundamentals as we usually do. And then you'll have a much better picture of the smoke and mirrors that happen in the news and the smoke and mirrors of and lack of understanding of even technical articles and companies trying to make conclusions that are most of the time very inconclusive. So that would probably be my big one for this year.
That's a gold star on both of those. That was great. All right, Dan.
Yeah, so I think the trend that I am excited about, and I think is going to continue to see, obviously, we talked a lot about AI and its role in offensive security, and I think that obviously that's going to play a big part, continue to play a big part. But I think what excites me strictly from the offensive security aspects are the marriage of using threat intelligence to help prioritize what you're testing for on a regular basis. And AI is perfect for distilling information and being able to apply it, creating test plans for the things that you should go test. And so I think the marriage of using threat intelligence and speaking more intelligently about threat actors and the role, like how well you can protect against these threat actors in your environment, is a trend that I've been seeing, and I'm excited to see it because I think it continues to help standardize on the nomenclature that we speak around exploits, vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and what our true gaps are. And so that's one thing that I'm really excited about, and I see a trend continue to help not only in the identification of these things, but the prioritization of them, being able to correlate, hey, what are the most important things that organizations should be focused on. So the tip that I would have related to that is continue to become very familiar with MITRE ATT&CK. I think it's a great framework. It supplies all of the information that you would need to know around known knowns, like, hey, these are what attackers are doing in the real world. And it's a great data set that you can also use to marry on top of your own models or just testing out different things of like being able to ask questions of like, hey, based on our tech stack, how would we go about testing for this specific threat, right? And what should we prioritize first? So not only becoming very well versed with MITRE ATT&CK and the different threat actors and TTPs out there, but then also just being able to know like, hey, start small, start testing. The best way to be proactive is to start now and test. It doesn't have to be super comprehensive, but get started somewhere. Similar to like, I kind of use the adage of like the best way to start losing weight is to start today and just do what you can today, and you'll see the progress as you go along. But don't get overwhelmed with all the things that you have been doing, and just start somewhere.
That's the best advice for everything. It's just taking that first step. Just taking that first step, do something. And Dan, a perfect segue into the slide that I put up on the screen here. That is a great first step. That is a fantastic follow-up. You can book a demo, which is obviously the best way to really get into the sandbox and really see how things work. So use that very fancy, I like your QR code, use that fancy handy dandy QR code up on the screen here right now and make sure you've got that. I do also want to say, you may have noticed that a survey came up on your screen here, and what we're doing is asking all of you a little bit about how you enjoyed the webinar and what you got out of it. So please do take a little time to fill that out. That's very helpful information. We want to make sure that we're getting you the info that you're looking for, right? So let PlexTrac and our team know how that went for you today. Fill out that survey, grab that QR code. Those are great ways to follow up. We're just at time. We were just that sped by. Dan and Tyler, before I let you go, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today, for bringing this conversation to life. I think you've really cut through the hype and the buzzwords and given us a lot to think about, a lot to look ahead to in 2025. Dan, any final thoughts or calls to action for the audience out there?
No, just really appreciate Tyler taking time out of your busy schedule to do the webinar with us, and Jess for coordinating it all. And yeah, really appreciate everybody's time. Feel free to check us out on the website, and we got plenty of other resources, ebooks and things like that can help you on your journey as well. So.
Awesome. Love that. Tyler, any final wrap up from you?
No, appreciate you guys. As always, Dan, text me. I'll be here.
Yeah, you've set a very dangerous precedent for that now, Dan. But Tyler, thanks so much for being here with us today. And Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. All right, I'm going to leave that slide up on the screen here because I want to give you as much time as you can to get to that QR code, make sure that you've got those resources. And I am just checking to make sure. It looks like everyone's gotten that survey. I can see that up there. If for some reason it's not letting you submit, maybe just check and make sure you've got an answer to each one of the questions and then try hitting submit. Worst case, that browser refresh should help you out. But we would definitely love to hear from you. So please do get those responses in. A reminder to visit the Docs tab if you haven't already. There are such good resources and takeaways. I'm telling you, that Docs tab is absolutely chock full of things. So first of all, you've got the Plex AI Security FAQ sheet. That is a great, quick and easy read. There's a couple of recordings actually that I'm going to recommend. There's like I think about a 30-40 minute video and then a full webinar. This is on the new artificial intelligence opportunities and threats for offensive security. You've got homework for hackers, discover cutting edge trends in pen testing and bug bounty hunting. That one is with the wonderful Dan, who we just heard from. So make sure you check that out. If you're somebody who likes that visual learning, those videos are fantastic. If you're looking for a little bit more of a read, there are 2 ebooks that I would recommend spending some time with. You've got Navigating the Cybersecurity Landscape in 2025, a preview of transformational trends and predictions. Those are very, very cool things. I like all those words, transformational trends and predictions. And then we also have an ebook on conversational continuous threat exposure management, a very cool read. So make sure you've got all of those resources and spend some time with those before you head out today. All right, well, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank PlexTrac and our wonderful guests for making this webinar possible. A big thank you to Dan and to Tyler. You have both given us so much to think about today. Like I said at the start, we didn't really know where we were going to go. We had some ideas for what we wanted to cover, and then we just threw all the planning away and dove in, and all of you were a big part of that. So my biggest high fives, my biggest gold star is going to all of you here with us today for making that conversation possible, for asking some fantastic questions. We are going to make sure that all the questions that were asked, and I know we barely scratched the surface on the questions, but we are going to make sure that all of those questions get sent to the team. So you will get responses back from PlexTrac and NVIDIA. So stay tuned for that and keep those questions coming in. All right, well, I had an absolute blast today with all of you. I've learned a ton. My brain is absolutely lit up and sparkling with information, and I hope that you are all feeling the same. I hope that you'll come back and join me for a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day. Thanks all.